Hi, leave you here. And I've been feeling this impulse to reboot this YouTube channel and start making some videos, possibly about spirituality and creativity and surrender, flow, liberation, the usual topics that I'm generally interested in. So I was thinking about what kind of video I would be intrigued to start with, to start talking about. And kind of the idea that came to me was to talk about the flow and how it looks like in practical daily life. So this story came up of how I do my grocery shopping, how the flow does my grocery shopping and then the cooking and how it looks like in that sense in my life. Because it's an interesting observation that I've noticed. I used to be in a relationship about 6 years ago, and it was a long-term relationship of almost 9-10 years. And my ex-partner and wife at the time, she was the one doing the grocery shopping and the cooking. And I never had to think about it or worry about what I should buy, what I shouldn't buy, and how much, and kind of to think about all the things that I needed, the ingredients for some kind of meal. It's never been my joy. It's never been interesting to me to do that. But then about 6 years ago, when I felt the need to let go of the relationship and of my previous work, I used to be a coach as well, a relationship coach, which I did for many years back then. About 6 years ago, I ended both the relationship and the coaching, and I kind of entered a bit of a spiritual transition that now I've come to see as the transition from ego-led life to Tao-led life, to flow-led life, so from ego to Tao. So anyway, in this 6 years, I've been mostly single and living by myself most of the time, and I remember then at the time when we just kind of ended the relationship and I had to do the shopping myself and I had to buy the groceries and think about the meals and so on. And what occurred to me at the time was that I didn't enjoy any of that. So why would I have to do that? Why would I have to think about what I have to buy and how much and so on? So because I was already kind of in my spiritual journey and kind of experimenting with this idea of following my joy and going with the flow, I thought, well, why don't I just let the flow do the grocery shopping and the cooking and the cleaning and everything else, right? Why don't I just outsource this part of my life to the flow? So the way this looked like at the time, and it keeps looking, now it's been 6 years and it keeps working, and I'm sharing this story because it's a great example of the flow in daily life, right? So what occurred to me at the time was that, well, why don't I just not think about it and just go to the shop whenever I feel the impulse to go to the shop. And I don't have to buy anything. Like if I can go to the whole shop and exit it without buying anything, that's fine. It means nothing was supposed to be bought. Nothing was relevant. Nothing piqued my interest. So the idea was that I would just enter the shop and whatever would pique my interest or attract my attention, and I would feel like, well, that's a good thing to buy. That's a good thing to buy. That's the right thing to buy. Then I would buy those things. Or if I actually had an idea of what I wanted to buy, that naturally came up, I would buy that. But if nothing came up or nothing caught my attention, I kind of let it go, any pressure, any agenda to buy anything. So just outsourced it all to the flow. So I would just enter the shop and just walk calmly and in this kind of surrendered state and allow whatever catches my attention. And I feel like this could be a good thing to buy. I'll just allow that to be bought and that's it. And then over the last 5, 6 years since I've been doing that, I'm always surprised when I come home and then I end up cooking something. I'm surprised by the end that it actually ends up being a delicious meal. I oftentimes after I've had the meal, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, wow, this was a delicious meal, and it came about in this natural way. I didn't even have to think about it. In a way, it's the flow that did the grocery shopping and then the cooking as well. And then I'm just at the receiving end, you could say. I've been just going through the motions and going through the process, just following my intuitive joy, and it seems to work out quite well. And even with the cooking as well, sometimes I don't know what I want to cook. I just look in the fridge and then look in the cupboard and I see I have a few ingredients here, a few here, and something kind of coagulates in my mind. I'm like, oh, I would like to make that. And other times, I don't know what I want to cook. I just have the first idea and I'm thinking, well, yeah, I should boil some potatoes. Like I should peel them off, cut them in small pieces, and I should boil them. And as I'm doing that, then the next step comes along. So you could say this fluid, flowing way of doing the grocery shopping or even living overall is about being in a state of receptivity versus reactivity to trying to be in control and figure things out and make things happen, which is not a very pleasant state to be in anyway. So just recently I was making these potatoes because it's a fresh example, and as I'm preparing the potatoes to be boiled, this next step comes along. It's like, oh, I have some conserved meat that would be a nice idea to kind of mix it with the potatoes once they are boiled, and then this nice, just delicious meal came out of that at the end. And I was having the meal and thinking, this, thank you, God, this was beautiful. As I've been feeling for the last 5, 6 years, because you see, it's almost like there's two elements, two forces going on in our life. There's the mind, and then there's the flow. So there's the egoic mind, which lives in its own kind of little world and bubble and feels in charge and then stresses about everything. And then there's the flow. And the mind doesn't realize that it exists within this context that we could call the divine or the intelligence of life. And as we learn to recognize the functioning of the mind and kind of the impulse to take charge, then we can also release it to the flow. And then we can experience this, I would say surprising, but also fascinating observation that life does take care of itself. And things are bought, things are cooked, the house is cleaned, and everything else really takes care of itself, because the flow doesn't just take care of the practical things, it takes care of the creative things, the money things, the relational things, the health things. And the philosophy that I've been kind of exploring and developing over the last 5, 6, maybe even 10 years is one of moving from the egoic, I have to make my life happen, to the more fluid surrender to life happening by itself, basically outsourcing my life to the flow, which is kind of a natural stage of spiritual development, where because the moment you begin to recognize that your own mind is quite limited and it's always seeking security in everything it does, and it's kind of arrogant to think that it is in charge and it can deliver that security. So the moment you realize that your mind is quite limited and you realize that you exist within this flow, this as the Taoists call it the way, the great way, then it begins to make sense. That's why a lot of people are kind of at this edge where they're moving from the ego to the will of God or the divine or the Tao. So it begins to make sense to kind of surrender the reins of your life to the flow, and including to do the grocery shopping and the cooking and creativity overall, your work, your money, and everything else. Which I actually may end up making more videos and sharing other stories of how life does take care of itself when it is allowed, when we're surrendering to it. So this is it for now. It's an introductory video and just a short story of how the flow looks like in your practical life. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.